And then now we'll go on to our movement front. So our movement front, it's called a couple different things. We'll call it 2-2. But basically, so our first two fronts are over and are under. Those are based on the strength of the field, and those are our basic fronts. Our other two fronts, so our tread and our flip, those are based on the location of the back. Now our 2-2 front, or our 22 front, however you want to call it, this will actually be based on the movement of the offensive line. So basically, our ends are going to have pretty similar, almost the same jobs. Our defensive tackles, they're both going to be lined up in the two gaps. And basically what they're going to do is they are going to run, and they're going to occupy the gap opposite of the flow. So on the backside of the flow, our defensive tackles are going to backdoor the play. Our Mike and our Will are going to be stacked on top of them, and they're going to be on the front side of the flow. And there are a couple different ways to coach this, but one way that you can coach it is you could actually use the nose and the tackle to play on the backside of the flow and to hold up the guards and really prevent them from getting upfield and climbing towards the Mike and the Will. So they're able to play that backside, whatever backside gap they're at, and allow the Mike and the Will to get penetration and to get up to the line of scrimmage without that combo block being successful on them. So I'll just show you guys an example. So let's say we're flowing to the right with our tackle, our guard, and then our guard is going to try and climb up to our Mike. So what our tackle and our nose, if we're flowing to the right, they're going to be on the back side of this flow. So our tackle would be in that strong side A gap, and that nose would be in that backside B gap. And then our Mike and our Will, they would flow over the top of this flow.
Hey, Robbie, I'll just show you guys a good question. So talking about the fronts that are based on the back, how do you go about, and I'm sure there's more than one way to do this in game plan and stuff, but if you get a team that spends most of their time in pistol, like that's one of the big things that I've noticed. Again, like there's a lot of cool stuff going on south of the border. Originally, that's where I saw it first, and I started to recognize it in like older CFL film that I was watching. You know what I mean, about the location of the back. And I think it's so hard in Canada because they can motion late. Right. And so how do you guys handle that? Like if this is a big part of your game plan, how do you handle, even if they don't stay in pistol all the way to the end, but just how late they can motion out of the pistol?
Yeah. So with pistol, that's something. So we'd have a lot of fronts that would just be based on flow. So just if I could show you, I need to erase all this stuff. But let's say we're in pistol. What you could do as a defensive end or as a coach, what we do is we'd have a jab crash call. So basically, if they were in pistol, whatever side the flow was towards would determine your job as a defensive end. So let's say they ran a flow away from you. That means you would be, or if they ran a flow towards you, so to this side, let me change back to black. If they ran flow towards you, you would be the jab player. But if they ran a flow away from you, then you'd be the crash player, and you would crash down on the running back, and the Mike would wrap around. The same thing, we ran it a couple days, especially with the text fronts. What we would do is if the flow was towards you and you had the 3 technique on your side, you would be the text player. And if the flow was towards you and you were on the open gap side here, you would be the jab player. So it's a little more thinking for you to do as a defensive end, but regardless, if you have flow towards you, you're going to make a quick decision on what's happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is tough. It's a great question. I said it's a great question in the chat because, so much of this stuff, like I've seen American defenses where it's like all based on the back. And I go, wow, like in Canada, you could bounce the back. You could be strong, weak, then strong again. Like it's so hard to like nail down those tendencies. But again, I think especially at the youth level, you might get teams that just never leave the pistol. But, especially if in pass protection or whatever, you're going to get that guy walk up at some point.
Yeah, for sure. I'll just show you guys a couple clips that we have of that 22. I'll show you the first clip against BC. I think that shows a pretty good look of what you could accomplish with it. So you can see just before the play starts, you're able to see both these defensive tackles, they're head up, so they're in both of those two gaps. And then we have our linebackers stacked on top of them. It's going to be flow to the right, so they're going to flow to the back sides of the gaps. So the same thing when I talked about that pre-snap eye progression, when we talk about box, back, line of scrimmage, this would tell you when you see number 20, big Mario Villamazar, and number 16 running around the box, that pre-snap, you need to be able to see that. You need to be able to see there's something going on. And whether they're the load player or whether they come to bomber you, you need to have your eyes away from aware from that. But just to show you guys back to the defensive tackles. So if you see number 90 on this weak side, he is going to fill into this backside B gap. And what he's going to do is he's going to hold up number 67 while playing that backside B gap. And he's going to let a free release for number 44 to come in and make a play on that ball almost untouched. Same thing here. We have our defensive tackle here, number 23. He's going to play that strong side A gap. And he's going to hold it up. He's going to stop 68 from really being able to come off early and climb up to that linebacker. So you can see our defensive tackles, they're playing on the back side of that flow and they're holding up the guards and they're not allowing those guards to climb up to the linebackers. And you can see number 44, he's able to ultimately come in and help make the tackle. Same thing's happening from
those guys going opposite the flow. I know you already talked kind of about eye progression, but is there anything specific? How do you, obviously we talk a lot, defensive coaches, about like fighting pressure. How would you coach a young defensive tackle? Like if this was the first time you're being exposed to this, like where do your eyes have to be? Where do your hands have to be to play that technique?
Yeah, so especially as coaches and the way we were coached, we were almost told, or at least in 22, when you're going to be on the backside of the flow, you almost want to be a half second late to the party. So you're going to want to feel the flow out first. So you're going to feel where the flow is, and because you're playing on the backside of the flow anyway, you're going to be a second late to wherever the flow is going. And then the way we coach it, because we want to hold up the guards. So there are two ways to coach it. There's one way to coach it where the defensive tackles could come in and get underneath and try and get penetration. And the other way is for the linebackers to come in and make the plays. So when we want the linebackers to come in and be aggressive and make those plays, for the defensive tackles, we want to play through the guard. So we want to get our hands on the guard and play through the guard to make that play. So if you could see this right side guard here, he's getting his hands on the guard. And then he's still playing in that A gap, but you can see his hands are on the guard, and the guard has to come off late to go and get to that will. And he's able to come off and still make the tackle. He's able to split that double team. And then the same thing when I talk about post-snap progression. So it goes from the hip of the tackle, especially on this backside defensive end, hip of the tackle, and then he sees that bomber in, and then we got to cut that. Make sure you make a miss. But yeah, it's a good tackle. Okay. One more play there. Can you hear me? Hello?
Sorry, I was muted there. Yeah, we got
okay.
We got your screen up there fine.
I just wanted to make sure the last time it cut out, so I want to make sure.
No, you're good.
But so here's another example of that 22 call. So right now we have a little variation on top of it. So right here we have what's called a 22 jab. So if you see the back is right behind this goalpost. So number 56, Bishop here, you can see that he's offset of the back. So he knows that flow is probably going to come towards him. So what he could do with that, and what he's going to do is he's going to jab underneath inside that B gap. And number 45, Herdman, he's going to wrap around into that C gap. And then everything else still applies. So the defensive tackles are going to be a half second late, and they're going to play on the backside of that flow. and they're going to be the ones that play on the backside of the flow. And then the linebacker number 51, he's going to flow on top of it.
Sorry, when you work that jab technique, seeing it here from the defensive end, what are the coaching points in terms of like the footwork, and do guys have some freedom to, like, I see here it's just a big inside rip. This is another like technique that I've been trying to learn more about, to, again, a lot of the stuff that I've been trying to learn about recently has been defending spread offense by playing 6 gaps with 5 guys. And this is one way to do it, ripping inside and letting your linebacker, your overhang play the C gap. Would you want the defensive end to get hands on the tackle first, or because he already knows, because he's opposite the back, it almost becomes like a stunt for him? Like, he's not reading it out. He knows he's running the jab.
Yeah, so he does know he's running the jab because he's offensive, opposite of the back. But we were given a couple of different ways and a bunch of freedom in ways that we could play this technique. So if you saw I believe it was the tread jab. I'll just show it again one more time. When he played it, he put hands on the tackle, and then he jabbed underneath. And then here he ripped totally underneath. So we were given a progression. So the first thing that you could do is you could just spike inside of the B gap and just so from your alignment, just take all your steps downhill straight into the B gap. And then the second way, what he's doing here is we were taught that we could take a hard step upfield. So you can see he takes a 1 step upfield to fake it, and then he's able to rip into that B gap. And then the third technique is that you could put hands on the tackle, give him a punch, and then fall underneath into that B gap. So it's just, especially as the game goes on, if you're going to run this jab concept a couple times, you want to give the offensive tackle a couple different looks because you want to keep him guessing, right?
Absolutely.
And then same thing for this 22 front. So same thing, they're playing on the backside of the flow. If you see number 90 on the backside, he's really getting hands on this guard too and really stopping this guard from climbing up to get to that Mike linebacker. So same thing, he's a half second late to the party, and then he's playing through the guard to help get him in. And then the same thing that we talked about when you're on the Sally side of the quarterback, looking at number 0, Toby Antigua, and how he plays this and how he's able to fall in and make the tackle. When we talk about that same eye progression, the pre-snap eye progression would tell us that there's something coming here, right? That there's something coming towards us. But even our post-snap eye progression, you could see that he sees the hip of the tackle go down, and then he's looking into that backfield to see if there's any cutters coming towards him. He sees the cutter, and he's able to work off of it, whiff off of that block, and then he's able to come under and make that tackle. Great job. Fantastic job.